My husband, Asian, and I, American, welcomed our firstborn 4 weeks ago. The baby is healthy, thank God, but I'm exhausted, haven't fixed my hair, barely able to shower and cannot sleep. My husband's family had been pressuring us to visit to meet the baby. I tried to hold them off as much as I could, but yesterday, I was surprised to find them standing on the porch. Turns out hubby invited them for dinner. I was embarrassed and felt like I wasn't ready for visitors, judgmental ones at that, cause the house was a mess, y'all. Anyways, my husband sat with them while I fed my son. Then later I asked my husband if we should order takeout for dinner. He said no, because his parents would find this rude and unwelcoming. He suggested that I go inside the kitchen and prepare something, anything long as it's homemade. I said fine, then went and made some mac and cheese. The reason I prepared this meal is because of how easy it is. Once I served the family, my husband's mom looked at me and was appalled. I noticed something was wrong. She asked if I really found it appropriate to serve her and the family mac and cheese. I asked why not, and she went on a rant about how disrespectful this was and that I clearly have no experience in what is right and wrong when it comes to hosting. I said, excuse me? Who said I signed up to host an expected visit from them? And she took it as in I didn't want them there. Her husband said they were just there to finally see the baby that I kept them from seeing for an entire month. That's a whole month of his life they missed out on. We had an argument and they decided to go home. My husband said that deciding to serve his family mac and cheese was more offensive than serving them nothing at all. I told him I was too exhausted to cook their traditional feasts that I was forced to learn from his mom. He took offense and said that I was being mean and disrespectful towards not only his family but his culture. I went inside the bedroom to stay with my son. My husband stayed on the phone with his family for an hour, then kept giving me the cold shoulder, and refused to eat what I cook in support of his family. I understand how some guests might find it offensive, especially his family, but I was just trying to make a quick homemade meal like my husband wanted. I am currently divorced from my ex Thomas of 30 years. We ended up seeing a lawyer to help with dividing stuff. Everything was pretty much wrapped up till he said he no longer wanted any part of our kids' lives. I didn't argue with him about it, since I already know what it's like having a parent who doesn't want you around, or wants to be in your life. I asked what he wanted me to tell the kids, and he just said, whatever you think is best, I don't care. I don't want to parent anymore. Everything was in agreement and signed with no fuss. A few weeks later I get a call from my ex-mill asking if we could meet each other. When I came over, she broke down crying and begging to let my ex see his kids again. I was confused about what she meant, because not once did he contact me after meeting the lawyer. She went on about how my ex said he really missed them and that I was just a petty B*TCH for taking full custody. Also that he was crying for days about it. I told her my version of events and she called it BS, saying her son wouldn't lie like that, especially not about his kids. Then I decided to call him in front of her. He didn't know she and I were meeting that day. I said, hey, has a soccer game in a few days, which he did, and I was wondering if you wanted to go? I know he'd really love it and be happy to see you. He instantly said no. I already said I'm not doing this anymore. I asked, well, how do you think this is going to affect Denise, his mom? She is over the moon about them. He just said she loves me more than the kids, so I doubt this will be an issue for her. After a bit more talking, we finally hung up. Ex-Mill was straight-faced and nodded at everything that just happened. She asked me to leave and said we would be in touch. Later that day I got a call from my ex saying how it's my fault he was kicked out of his mom's house, and possibly will be taken off her will. Also that none of his family members will talk to him because of what ex-Mill heard. He threw a lot of insults at me before I hung up, and now him and his mates keep calling and texting me. My friend is saying I shouldn't have said anything in the first place and I ruined his life. Yes, I plan to let Denise see the kids because I know she just wants to give them the world along with the rest of his family. My brother and I do not get on. When we were younger, he'd go out of his way to make my life a living hell. To my parents' credit, they did tell him off for it when they caught him, but they both worked long hours and didn't have the energy to deal with our arguments. This continued into adulthood. He was salty that he failed his college course the first time around. There was a bad argument in our family a while ago, and it all started because I refused to decorate my brother's living room. I won't go into too much detail, but he wanted a pretty hefty discount. I said no and he threw a tantrum. Instead of being a grown-up and talking to me, he decided to hook up with my toxic ex-girlfriend and the mother of my child. I can't go into a lot of detail about what she was like, but she was not a nice person. She never really bonded with our son when he was born, and I was left to do everything by myself. She eventually walked out on us and refused to have any contact with our son. She'll post on Facebook now and then about her beautiful baby boy to get sympathy votes, but that's about it. I have been a single dad for almost 3 years now, and I absolutely adore my son, but it hurts to think that one day he might question why his mom didn't want anything to do with him. How am I supposed to explain that to him? Anyway, it bothered me when my brother told me they'd hooked up together. It hurt even more when he started dating her. It had taken me so long to get over what she did to me and my child, and now my own brother was bringing her back into my life. Yesterday we had a family video call. Parents are high risk and we're not taking any chances. When my brother decided to announce that he and my ex were expecting, I just froze. I didn't know what to do or think. I could feel myself starting to cry a little bit, and it got a bit harder to breathe. Eventually, I decided to just congratulate them and then made up some lie about needing to put my son down for a nap and left. I received a bunch of messages from my brother and his GF telling me that I stole their thunder. After I left, my parents and some other family members started worrying if I was okay, and not really focusing on their news. My uncle told me that I should have just been a man and stuck it out instead of making excuses to get out of it. After all, it was expected that our kids would be raised around each other. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have left the call, but at the same time it would have been worse if I'd stayed and had a full-blown panic attack in front of everyone. Some of the family members are split and have argued that I won't be able to avoid my brother and his family forever, but others believe I was in the right to leave that situation. I don't know what to think. My parents aren't happy, but they don't have the energy to deal with all the hassle my brother would cause. They actually cut him off for a little while when he started dating my ex, but he phoned them constantly and, again, can't go into much detail, but he said he'd do something not so good. They keep him at arm's length, but I have told them not to cut contact because of me. If they want to cut contact on their own accord, then that's fine, but I do not want to be the reason that they have to deal with his tantrums. The rest of the family, for the most part, weren't happy about it but accepted it, or pretended to. When they started getting a bit more serious, my uncle, who told me to be a man, thought it was funny. That's just the kind of person he is. Not for my sake, but for the sake of my son. I don't want to put him through all that. Background about my sister. 2 years ago, my sister was killed in a car accident. She was riding with a friend to the mall. The friend's parent was driving, and teenage boy plowed through a red light while texting on his phone and hit the car my sister, Carrie, was in. Carrie was killed instantly, and her friend, June, was in a coma for 3 weeks before her parents took her off life support. When Carrie passed, I was devastated and angry and just not in a good place. Carrie and I had been extremely close. Despite a 7-year age gap between us, we enjoyed a lot of the same shows. We went to concerts together. We volunteered together, and I took it upon myself to guide Carrie like any big sister would do. Our parents were extremely busy with work most days, and Carrie and I would often cook together and do crafts when we weren't too busy with school work. Carrie wanted to be a NICU nurse when she grew up, and I helped her find a volunteer position at a local hospital to help get her gain some experience being around patients. In short, Carrie was my sister and best friend, and when she passed, I was a mess. The last craft Carrie and I made together was a set of candles. We bought the wax at a local craft store, and we both made each other a candle and decorated the jar it was in. That was the day before she was killed. At her funeral, Carrie was buried with the candle I made her. The candle Carrie made me sits on my desk next to my favorite picture of her and I together at the beach. Or it did, until last week. Background about my boyfriend. I met my boyfriend about 1.5 years ago, about 6 months after Carrie passed. I wasn't looking for a relationship, I was still grieving my sister's death. But Eugene came along, and it was love at first sight. He was extremely supportive, let me cry on him when I needed to, didn't push me into getting over grieving or anything. He was extremely gentleman about everything and very, very patient. After 6 months of seeing each other pretty regularly, we made it official. Eugene came into my life at a very low point, and he has always been very respectful of sentiments I keep from my sister. Never asking me to take them down, always giving me space when I needed to cry. Eugene, along with most, if not all, of my friends and family know about Carrie's candle. There was a point after she died where I would take the candle with me everywhere out of fear that someone might light it, or steal it. Or who knows what. The point is, that candle was and still is a very important part of my life and something that my sister made for me and me alone. When Eugene and I moved in together about 4 months ago, I packed away most of the reminders of my sister and put out the candle and picture on my desk. I felt that this was a huge step because when I'd lived just by myself I had pictures everywhere and a few knickknacks laying around from my sister. I wanted to make Eugene and I's home our home with just a small part of my sister there. Eugene understood and was very supportive. Last week, we had a massive winter storm that knocked out power. We didn't have power for 3+ days. The power was knocked out at Eugene and I's house while I was at work, which did not lose power. Eugene texted me that he was going to light some candles and try and get a generator, so we could have some for of power or at least be able to charge our phones / use lights / etc. Now, we have probably 30+ candles in our house. I am a huge fan of sales, and when Bath & Body Works has a candle sale, I like to stock up and get a range of scents. We have candles scattered all over our house. In the room where my desk is, there are no candles aside from the one Carrie made me. None at all, and there never has been. This room is also downstairs, where Eugene doesn't spend a lot of time. His desk is upstairs. When I arrived home from work last week, I noticed a bunch of candles burning in our living room, safely. Always monitored and not near anything that could ignite. One of these candles was the candle that Carrie had made me. I burst into tears, and when Eugene heard me crying he came out from the bedroom, where he was lighting more candles, and asked what was wrong. I was a wreck and couldn't get any words out. When he tried to calm me down, I shoved past him and locked myself in the room where my desk was and just cried. I don't know how he could be so stupid. He knew, and I thought he understood how sentimental the candle was and how much I cherished having a candle that my now deceased sister had spent time making with me just a day before she was killed. I haven't been able to speak to Eugene since it happened, Tuesday of last week. He has tried to explain why he did it, because he needed candles to be able to see, but I just can't wrap my head around it. He hadn't gotten into the large candle stash I have upstairs right by the living room where Carrie's candle was, but went downstairs, out of the way to grab the most sentimental, cherished item I have. The candle was burning most of the day while I was at work and is now melted and pretty much gone. I do still have the jar it was in, but I can't look at it without bursting into tears. Eugene says it was an accident, but I just don't believe that. He said he was getting around to lighting the candle surplus we have upstairs, but just hadn't gotten there yet. After being home 6 hours alone with no power, I am heartbroken and feel like this is a major slap in the face. I feel disrespected. I feel like he disrespected my sister. I just don't know what to do. I don't feel like I can forgive him for this.